Minor, the energy crisis has made us all aware of the lack of and need for public transportation. How would you address that need?
Well, I have been a part of a number of legislative sessions that have addressed that need. The state of Connecticut ordered $1.2 billion, I think, of new trains. It was a very old, very antiquated system, and there was a lot of support for it. We have renovated the New Haven rail yard and associated rail yards. I heard the conversation earlier this evening, and there was some discussion about improvements to the rail line going into Waterbury and north, and the same thing along the Danbury line. There's no doubt in my mind that we have infrastructure improvements that we could do. I think they should be related more to freight movement. I hear a lot of complaints about truck traffic, and I think if there's a way for us to move freight out of some of the hubs that we have in the state of Connecticut, it would actually make a lot of people happier on a lot of different fronts. But we have spent a lot of money. And the problem we have right now is the Democrats have balanced the budget by borrowing money. And so if we think we're going to be able to go into the bond market and bond another $2 or $3 billion to improve rail lines, I'm afraid they've spent the money on turning the lights on in the Capitol. And so the problem we have here is that it's going to be very difficult for us on a go-forward basis to make the kind of improvements we should be making, not because we didn't have the money, but because instead of making some of the tough decisions that should have been made in the legislature, the majority decided to borrow money to pay for those bills instead.
Thank you, Mr.
Craig keeps mentioning the Democrats, the Democrats, the Democrats. I think he's forgotten that people of this district have elected him to Hartford the last five terms for 10 years, not to be a Republican, but to represent us. So I would say, how come you haven't been involved in changing these scenarios? How come you haven't been more? How come we haven't created more results in keeping our financial house in order? I think it goes to your effectiveness in Hartford. To go to transportation specifically, some of you may have followed. There's been a debate raging now for over 2 years now at this point between if there's going to be funding for a busway going from New Britain into Hartford, or whether those funds would be redirected to pay part of the way for a commuter rail or enhanced rail going from Waterbury through Bristol into Hartford. I have searched newspaper records. I've searched the CTN website. I haven't found any public comments by my opponent on that project. I have to say, as somebody who represents the Woodbury area, who would see direct benefit to both their property values and just their accessibility to jobs in the Hartford area, I would be doing everything I could to make sure that the busway did go forward, that we did have a rail system, a more efficient rail system out of Waterbury. Again, I think transportation in general is a place that can be a differentiator for the state of Connecticut. We're between two large metropolitan areas. We have excellent ports. Transportation should be a benefit to our businesses in the state instead of something that stops their goods from moving. We need to relieve congestion on 95. We need to relieve congestion on I-84, and we have to make sure that we as people can commute and our goods and services can get out of our borders.
And again, we talked of the highways. Do you support or oppose resuming highway tolls?
Well, I am not in favor of highway tolls. I think that we spend enough money as it is already in the state of Connecticut. I think we, in this country, I think that we spend enough money in taxes and give enough fees to the government in general. I don't believe that revenues is our problem. I believe that waste is our problem. I believe that if we look at our budget and we're able to systematically go through and streamline the things that can be changed, and things that can be altered, and things that can be gotten rid of, we'll find more than enough money to fund the programs that we need. The first thing we have to do is we have to, just like a family budget we have to get our house in order. We have to make sure that our credits are equaling our debits. And then, once we've got a sound financial foothold, we can look forward to the future. We can look into new programs, into new transportation initiatives to make sure that we do have the most robust and dynamic and effective transportation system in the country.
Thank you.
If elected this year, I would actually enjoy the opportunity to have this conversation both in committee and on the House floor. I do think there's a place for tolls in the state of I think some highways probably lend themselves better than others to the putting tolls back in. I also think that the dollars that would be received on those tolls would actually benefit us in terms of our federal reimbursement for highway administration dollars. There's no doubt that people have criticized tolls because of things like pollution and congestion. But I think anybody that's traveled along the eastern seaboard know that items such as the Easy Pass in some states actually allow you to go through those tolls in a confined framework area at almost 55 miles an hour. So I think the changes in technology have been sufficient enough for us to actually have this conversation again. I would agree with my opponent that the problems facing the state are primarily driven by spending, not revenue. But certainly the issue of who's paying for mass transit, when that bill is shared by all taxpayers, and who's paying for improvements to highways are being paid by all taxpayers, really does remove the problem, let's say, on I-95 to a population that he hopes to serve. And so I think in terms of trying to look at the way the state of Connecticut can reinvest in its infrastructure, whether it be for highway improvements or whether it be for mass transit, the reintroduction of tolls is something that should be part of that equation.